Around the world and coast to coast, this is Intensify Ministries. Stephen invites you to go deeper in worship and get intimate with God. And now let's worship the Lord together and grow in grace with the family of Intensify Ministries.
I was actually, I told David about this one website called YouNow. And it's basically you can go on there and broadcast with your webcam, and you can talk to people, and they can chat, the chat room next to you. And first time I ever checked that website out, there was a guy in the, you guys know me by now, I'm like all about YouTube and all the techie stuff. And
That's right.
And there was this guy in there talking about how he's very passionate about making videos, and editing and stuff like that. And I've never met him before. I was just in the chat room, watching him talk. And I was typing to him, and I said, if you're very passionate about it and you're good at it, just keep doing it. Because he's like, I eventually want to make this my career, but I don't know if other people think I'm good enough. And I told him how I actually got started. It was actually over at Ignited and in the singles over there, and I just started recording the singles and playing around editing them, and I opened up a YouTube channel for the singles and everything. Probably about a year later, I get a call from Pastor Stephen Strader, and he had seen the videos from the singles, and he was looking for somebody to record Pastor Carl on his 5 o'clock service because they didn't have an extra camera to put in there. So basically because I was doing something that I love to do, just because, I started technically doing a job recording Pastor Carl Strader at his service. And then I would do other odd jobs around the church for like the sign that's out front and everything. And then David comes along. And
Suddenly, David.
so he came along, he came up to me, and he saw the kind of work that I do, and he wanted me to make a promo DVD for his ministry. And even to this day, we just haven't stopped doing that yet. And one thing I really love, and I thank him for, is I have never been asked to be on a board of anything before. And I was literally riding my bicycle to work. And back then it used to take maybe 2-3 hours to go from Mulberry all the way up to 98 North. And I'm just riding away, my phone rings, it's David. And asking me if something to think about, to be a working board member for his ministry. So I basically told him, let me think about it for a minute. Okay. So I've been doing that, promo DVDs, and I'm saying this basically because I just started out by doing something that I love to do. I have a passion for it. And whether or not it turns into a career or just a hobby, I'm going to keep doing it because that's what I love to do. And by doing what you love to do, you're going to put 100% or 110% maybe into it every time. And then other people are going to see, what you do. And my motto has always been as professional as possible at all times. So sometimes I think I drive Don crazy back there. So.
You bless us too.
So and then we started up the ABN website and everything, and I finally convinced her to be on camera every once in a while.
You did.
So back to Matthew. I originally was going off of her Matthew 10, and I came across Matthew 11. That's how I got on that. YouNow. That's right. I was on that site for the first night, and when I was talking to that guy, and he was just, I ended up counseling with him, saying just keep doing what you love doing. And he had told me, he's like, you, Steve, are my motivation tonight. He goes, because I was to the point where I'm like, well, I love doing it, but if it's not going to go anywhere, you know, and I don't know if other people would like what I do. And then I come along saying, well, if it's your passion, if it's something you love doing, keep doing it, because it might just be that one day that you don't expect that somebody comes to you and you end up getting a job because you're just doing what you love. And I saw another user on there, and this is how I came across Matthew 11. The guy's username was Matthew 11. I haven't seen him since that night. So I didn't end up talking to him, but I just looked up Matthew 11 because she had mentioned Matthew 10. And I just want to read like the first part and then I think like the last part of it. And this is going to lead into the closing. Matthew 11, chapter 1 says, "And it came to pass, when Jesus had made an end of commanding his 12 disciples, he departed thence to teach and to preach in their cities. Now when John had heard in the prison the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples, and said unto him, Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and show John again those things which you do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he, whosoever shall not be offended in me." And then jumping down to verse 28, it says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." So basically, we're talking about blessing. You know, if you're out there encouraging others, and you're being a blessing to others, we shouldn't be looking to be blessed. We should be looking to be a conduit of blessing. So God will bless you, and as he blesses you, you take that blessing and you bless others. And then God will bless you more. If you're just that conduit and it's a big circle, don't you dare hold all that blessing into yourself. And if somebody wants to bless you, I used to have a problem with this. Sometimes I still do at times. Don't always turn them down. Because I've had people say, "Don't you rob me of my blessing." Because they want to be a blessing by blessing you. And you don't want to steal their blessing. But then you don't want to take advantage of people either. So you have to keep that in mind. So if you're constantly out there being a blessing and blessing others and encouraging others, he's going to bless you. And as the scripture says, if you have problems in your body, if you're sick and whatever, maybe your blessing is going to be that you come to church one night and God heals you. And I've been through a lot of stuff where I've actually had, the way I got into youth ministry was because, well, not because I grew up with just a mother. I didn't know my dad until I moved down here to Florida when I was like a senior in high school. And I've always had a heart to work with teenagers. And I was actually homeless at the time up in Buffalo, and I was at the homeless shelter. And wouldn't you know it, I ended up being the chaplain's backup in the chapel services. So if the chaplain had to leave early that night, because sometimes we'd have churches come in, but sometimes they'd cancel or not show up, then they said it was up to me to take the service. and just like off the top of my head come up with a message and do the worship and everything else. And they started calling me pastor because every time they see me, I'm in the chapel. Not realizing that that was a prophetic act and that one day I would become a pastor.
Amen.
And so while I was actually doing one of the chapel services, the church actually showed up. And what I found out was the youth pastor at the time, he pulled me aside, and we never met each other. He pulled me aside out of the chapel, and the first thing he said was, I can tell that you have the ability to relate to teenagers on their level. Because you've been there, you've done that, you bought the t-shirt, and you've probably sold it too. So I don't know what it was, because ever since junior high, I've always wanted to work with teenagers. And Lori can attest to this. I used to say at that point that I'm not called to work with kids. And I would say I don't want to work with kids. I don't want all these kids around me because I don't know what to do with them. Well, never say that to God. It turned out that when I was at Ignited, I was working with youth for a while, but then that door shut. And then she asked me to come into kids' church, and I laughed at her the first time. But I finally went in there, and wouldn't you know it, from the first moment I stepped foot in the kids' church, I felt like I've been in there for years. And the kids actually, they really didn't know me yet, but they actually treated me like I've been in there for years. I mean, I literally stepped into the room, and one of the kids was like, he's on our team. I'm like, okay, what are we doing? You know? And then basically we've been in there ever since, and then we started teaming up. And the pastor's wife, Pastor Jan, she actually said, the reason why you two are so good in kids' church is because they don't know what to expect next. And then she said, I don't even know what you're going to do next. So I told her that's fine, because half the time I don't even know what I'm going to do next. We'll just go with it, you know. So, but then recently we just decided, because there's been a lot of changes in kids' church over there. The current kids pastor, last I heard, by the end of this month, they're going back to Tennessee. They're going back to where they came from. We didn't kick them out. They just felt that a year was enough. They were called here for a year. So now kids' church is being revamped, and because we're making a transition, we feel that we're called to transition over here. We've decided that we're going to be done with kids' church. So
Over there.
over there, yeah. Who knows what's going to happen over here?
At least that's our
the
plan.
and the whole time I was in kids' church over there, I had the youth, even some of the ones I didn't work with. They're asking me, why did you leave? When are you coming back? And they're begging me to come back into the youth group. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what's happening with that. So I don't know how I got off on that. So basically, if you're being a blessing to others, God's going to bless you. And you don't always know what that blessing is going to be and how it's going to happen.
Or where it'll come from.
Yeah. And some people, they pass up their blessing because they're not looking for it. I mean, it's almost like there's a big semi-truck coming down the road that says blessing on the side of it. And they're standing there going, I wonder whose blessing that is. I don't know about you. I'd be out in the front middle of the road trying to stop that truck and say, I'll take that. You know? It's like you have to look for your blessing, because if you're not, it'll just pass you by because you won't recognize it. So